gonna get?
Oh, it might go higher. Can stop until we start.
Yeah, that's,
You good?
okay, good?
Can you see, Daddy?
Yeah, that's fine. Earlier, Colonel Thomas Taylor of the American Revolution owned many slaves. One was named Sancho and was probably the colonel's personal servant. When Colonel Taylor died, he left Sancho to his son Benjamin Franklin. When he died, he left him to his son Captain Thomas Taylor, and aide to General Wade Hampton during the Civil War. Sancho died at age 72, and his tombstone was in the small Taylor plot at Trinity Cathedral. He was a minister and preacher in Columbia, showing freedom of actions. He must have had a very close personal relationship to all three of his Taylor owners for him to be buried at Trinity in their plot. He is the only Negro in that graveyard. I believe his desire to be buried by his masters and their desire to have him there too, and the tone of the epitaph manifests a high mutual respect for each other in a Christian relationship. Below is the epitaph which he wrote himself. Servant of Colonel Thomas Taylor, died July the 6th, 1864, at age 72 years. During a large portion of his life, he was a member of the Columbia Baptist Church. When for many years a preacher of the gospel, he was humble and laborious and strove faithfully to serve both his heavenly and his earthly master in all the relations of his life as a servant, a Christian, and a preacher. So he wrote this himself. He enjoyed the respect and confidence of all who knew him. His colored brethren, he was particularly dear to his colored brethren. He was particularly dear. They loved and received his couldn't tell what was the tombstone was kind of gave out there. And now he has been called to his rest in heaven. They desire to show their respect for his virtues and their gratitude for his labors among them by placing stone over his grave. So that's kind of the relationship he had with Mama Lily and then this man. Mm-hmm. And very interesting, the German came to visit Columbia. Father found an article he wrote about it. What he said was that the Taylors, the slaves and the Taylors were all really basically one family. They were both of them happy. Both the whites and the blacks had it worked out so that they got along well together for generations. That's an outsider that came in looking at what was going on, which was interesting. Okay, now I've got a...
Okay, Tammy, that's good.
from other historical sources. Harvard threatened to sue me for the use of the first photograph that I showed you. So I thought, Harvard is going to sue me for using these images of black people in their collection. The richest university in the world. I think that I don't have really a legal case, but maybe I have a moral case that could be made that might be really useful to carry out in public. And so after worrying about it and thinking about it, I called them up and I said, I think actually your suing me would be a really good thing. You should. And we should have this conversation in court. I think it would be really instructive for any number of reasons, and certainly for artists that are really engaged in the act of appropriation, who think that there's a larger story to tell.
And that is that when they held these pictures, they were holding them, in essence, for the real owner. That's Tamara Lanier. And the replevin action is as old as the English common law. And that is an action that provides for the return of property that is not yours. So she has brought a replevin action because she, more than anybody else known to man, is the closest person entitled to them. So that's an old one. And I want to point out something. Replevin was used in the 1850s by slave owners under the Fugitive Slave Act to have slave returned to the owner. That's how old this is. And we just want the same law to apply to Tamara Lanier that applied to the slave owner getting his property.
Attorney Ben Crump, along with Attorney Josh Koskoff, we have the honor of representing the family and the lineal descendants of Renty. In 1850, a Harvard scientist contracted with a South Carolina slave master to have his photograph taken in an effort to prove his racist theory that blacks were inferior to whites. His family has approached Harvard about having these images returned to their family. Harvard has refused. So today, we don't want you to talk about R. Kelly, Jesse Smollett, or the Mueller investigation. We want you to hashtag free Renty and sign the petition. Renty is 169 years a slave. Harvard, when will you finally free Renty?
Here, but today they took their fight right to Harvard and brought along some surprising support. WBZ's Beth Germano has the details.
And this is Papa Renty here.
It's the haunting photo of an African slave at the center of a dispute over whether it's a personal photo belonging to the family of Tamara Lanier or Harvard University.
But when I first saw that image, it was just like a validation of all the stories that I've heard as a child.
Lanier is the great-great-great-granddaughter of Papa Renty, whose photo was taken along with his daughter Delia in 1850 by renowned Harvard zoologist Louis Agassiz as part of a study arguing that black people are inferior to white people.
Do we think Renty and Delia consented to be part of a project to justify their own enslavement? Of course not.
Tamara Lanier has found unusual allies in a lawsuit against Harvard, the descendants of Louis Agassiz, who are renouncing their great-great-great-grandfather's study, saying it's time to write history.
And I feel like I've been lifted into this extraordinary story that this woman is leading.
The family spoke by a building that bears Louis Agassiz's name. Those photographs are stored in a museum on campus as cultural artifacts.
I don't think that Harvard has a right to have absolute control and authority over the images, given the circumstances of their origin.
Together, the families delivered a letter to Harvard's president, signed by 42 descendants of Louis Agassiz in support of the lawsuit, demanding Harvard turn over the rare photos, claiming the university is profiting from them. So far, Harvard hasn't commented.
Surreal when you think about the totality of the story and the fact that you have the linear descendants of Renty and the linear descendants of Louis Agassiz standing in solidarity
and hoping to make their own history. In Cambridge, Beth Germano, WBZ News.
Here she is, my aunt.
That's quite a painting.
She was taken off the walls of our home by the Nazis. Since then, she's been hanging in Vienna.
And now you'd like to be reunited.
And then there's justice. I never thought I'd come back.
Welcome to Vienna. They're going to put as many obstacles in your way as possible.
She is the Mona Lisa of Austria. We will fight you till the end for something we believe is ours.
They destroyed my family, and they forced me to abandon the people and the places that I loved.
Here to file a lawsuit. We're taking the Austrian government to court. Have a nice day.
All along, you have thwarted me and closed the doors in my face.
This is a case of one woman wanting justice.
People see a masterpiece by one of Austria's finest artists. But I see a picture of my aunt. We should be reunited with what is rightfully ours.
Can you explain who Renty and Delia are?
Yes, I'm attorney Ben Crump, and along with attorney Mike Koskoff, I have the honor of representing the lineal descendants of the African slave Renty. His great-great-great-granddaughter, Tammy Lanier, has filed a lawsuit against Harvard University, one of the leading educational institutions in the world, definitely the leading educational institution in America. And what we are doing with that lawsuit is groundbreaking on every level. I believe that it will be the most consequential lawsuit in America in the field of civil rights since Brown versus the Board of Education, because once we are successful in having Harvard relinquish the slave photographs of Renty and his daughter Delia, it will mark the first time in history that an American institution has been forced to relinquish the inheritance of any of the descendants of African slaves in America. And more importantly, it will pave the way for future litigation in the way of making sure that black people in America finally can get their inheritance, because we never got 40 acres and a mule. We were never able to own anything. So when Abraham Lincoln and the United States government freed the slaves in 1865, the one thing we thought at least we owned was our person, and incumbent in that was our image. But Harvard University is saying 169 years later, no, Tammy Lanier, you still don't even own your image. We own your image. So in that lawsuit, we were very specific. The Hollywood director Steve McQueen and Brad Pitt produced the Oscar-winning movie 12 Years a Slave about Solomon Northup. Well, in this
is the closest person entitled to them. So that
Don't trip. I'm gonna take it off your hands for you.
These items aren't for sale.
How do you think your ancestors got these?
Agassiz theory's rubbish.
Give us 3